Hi there, Frank Winston here for the Pacifica Historical Society, and I'm the host of the weekly show Footprints of Pacifica, where we explore and discover the lure and lore of lovely Pacifica, its characters and its character. This week's show focuses on the history of sports in Pacifica, and so you probably guessed our guest will be, and is, Horace Hinshaw, Mr. Sports of Pacifica. Welcome, Horace. Tell me, how did you first decide to come to Pacifica, and when was that?
Frank, first, thank you very much for having me on the program. My wife and I moved to Pacifica in 1969. We got married and came down here and settled in Pacifica. We had lived in San Francisco and we've been here ever since.
Well, what brought you into the sports scene, and how did you get connected with the Tribune, which you've been a columnist and writer for years?
That is very interesting because my background is in sports writing when I was in Arkansas, originally from Arkansas. And I came out here and we got married. I was coaching a Little League team in San Francisco, moved down here. I always wanted to get back into sports writing somehow. I had initially worked with the San Francisco Chronicle a little bit when I was in the military, when I was stationed for Presidio, San Francisco. I came down here. I heard about the job down at the Tribune. They were looking for a sports writer. Went down. Talked to Bill Drake, who was the publisher at that time, and we thought, well, maybe we could work out a deal. I was working full-time with the Postal Service, and we thought, well, how's this going to work out? We tried it for 2 weeks. 2 weeks led into 20 years.
And when you had a sports scene to write about there, what actually were the sports? I mean, there's many more today, nationally and locally, but what did you have then? Primarily,
it's the high school sports that we're talking about. Terra Nova and Oceana were the two prime schools at that time. And of course we had all the youth sports. We had Little League, Pop Warner football. Soccer had not came into the realm yet, but we also had surfing. We had fishing on the pier. We had a lot of little
horseback riding was there?
We had horseback riding. A good place to raise your children was in Pacifica.
For sports as well, because they had that organized. And you were involved in that. I heard there was a semi-pro team, which is different from the school teams and the Little League teams. What was that about?
You know, back in the 40s and 50s, semi-pro baseball was very big in not only Pacifica and Peninsula, but Bay Area completely. A lot of baseball. San Francisco Seals was big back there before the Giants got here. And in Pacifica, we had a team called the Coastside Merchants. Ironically, they were sponsored by the Merchants. And one of those sponsors is still sponsoring sports today, and that was Nick's of Rockaway. And they were probably the first sponsor of all sports in Pacifica, going back as far as 1948, which you see of this picture right here. And this picture is really neat because only these pictures right here, only two people that I really know that are still living in Pacifica. One is Lou Piccolotti, right here, one of the better ball players ever come out of Pacifica. I really wish Lou was still living today because he could tell us so much about the sports history of Pacifica. He lived and worked and breathed sports throughout his whole career. The other person, and from whom I received a picture, is Lorraine Peterson Regan at that time. She was the bat boy or the bat girl at that time. And so she allowed me to have the picture, and that's how we have this. But that was the semi-pro baseball team at that time. And you know where they played? They played, if you're familiar, they played, if you're familiar, where Moose Lodge is today in Fairway. There was a baseball site there, and they played in that baseball site for years until redevelopment came in and the Moose Lodge and housing was built there.
I suppose you were way ahead of your time. Bat girls were probably not heard of in too many leagues that even wanted girls to be involved.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think that really the Tribune was in the forefront of that, of promoting girls' sports. Even before Title IX came in, we were promoting Bobby Sox girls softball, really giving them a lot of space and ink and everything. So I really think that we were in the forefront. When Title IX came in, that really put a lot of high profile on our girls' sports. Our high school girls were really able to show what they could do. And from that, they all went up to college and got the scholarships.
For a few of our people who don't follow sports, there are a few, but Pacifica Sports will help them do that. Title IX did what, actually?
Title IX made it equal for boys and girls to play athletics and equality.
So they gave more money for the sports, more direction, more enthusiasm.
And more sports themselves, because at that time they were under the Girls Associated Athletic League, and that's how it worked out for the girls.
Now, we had a field here at that time called White Fields, and when I say that time, it's back to many years. Where was White's Field?
White Field was a site that's on Lindenmar Boulevard, and if you know it right now, it's the Alma Heights School. Back in the 50s, that was an open field where Little League and youth baseball was being played, and so many volunteers made it happen that they were able to build a facility there. At one time, as you'll see in the overview there were 4 fields in that area there. If you can imagine, there were 2 Little League fields, a Babe Ruth field at that time, and an adult softball field. So it was a very popular place for people to go out and enjoy their activities. There really wasn't that much organized sports back there until about the late 50s, to where Little League became probably your first youth organized sports in 1957.
Now we have a video clip of some of the field, and we have, let's see, the aerial view of the fields, but there's also a shot showing the Sanchez Adobe in the background. Can you see on the monitor, what do we have, which fields we have there
Well,
now?
he's got the Adobe, the Alma Heights field up there right now, and so that's where the 4 fields were. And I also noticed he had sneaked up a picture of Lou's baseball team, a Joe DiMaggio team. And in that picture, if you could pick it out, you saw Joe DiMaggio. And Joe DiMaggio came down here to visit with us and awarded a trophy to our state championship 1970 Joe DiMaggio baseball team.
And that was here in Pacifica's where DiMaggio actually came to Pacifica?
No, he came to Pacifica several times when the league was playing, but in that particular shot there, that was taken out in Yountville up in Northern California, where the state
Well, that's where the presentation was made. Okay. Now, what difference, when Title IX came in, what kind of sports did girls have then, and what do they have more in the schools now?
Well, they had sports, they had basketball and things like that, but they were more like club sports. And then when the Title IX came in, they were allowed to compete in leagues and things like this. And so that really jumped the girls' sports into the forefront. And we've had some outstanding girls go on to play collegiate basketball and other sports.
When the 2 high schools, predominantly when you were here, there's still the 2 high schools. How did they fare in rivalries, in which was more popular for sports? And also, isn't it a fact that the schools are open, anyone can come from anywhere and play in Pacifica?
Well, when the 2 schools started back in the early 1960s, there's Terra Nova on the south, Oceana on the north. They were competing in all sports, football, basketball, baseball, track, cross country. But we came to know every year there was an annual football game, and it was called the Anchor Game. And ironically, the person that really initiated that was a former sports writer for the Tribune, Joe Grosso. He found an old anchor out in the ocean, able to bring it back up, polished it all up, and we made an anchor out of it. And for 26, 7, 8 years, the 2 teams competed against each other to take the anchor home and keep it for the next year. Great rivalry, great sportsmanship. It was a beautiful time in Pacifica. Unfortunately, Oceana, as you well know, closed their school and went back to sort of a charter school and sort of eliminated some of the sports programs there, particularly football. And so the rivalry that the Terra Nova Tigers now have is now with the Half Moon Bay team, and so they compete back and forth each year.
Does the anchor be given, or some other award?
No, the anchor, as far as I know right now, is still in the showcase at Terra Nova High School, because they were the last ones to win the anchor. And now the Terra Nova and Half Moon Bay compete against another.
They have some other symbol.
Right, yes, exactly right.
Okay. Now, you helped to form the Pacifica Sports Club, which is still in existence. Who helped you found it, and what did it form for?
Well, back in early 1980s, there was a club that was really started by Jerry Schumacher, sort of like a Pacific American Legion organization. In 1984, I was a sports writer at that time, and he came forth and we talked about doing something with athletes. And so the Pacifica Sports Club was born from that meeting with him and his charter members, you might say. So since 1984, up until about maybe 9 years ago, the Pacifica Sports Club was honoring athletes annually. What happened about 9 years ago, the Pacifica Tribune was not able to have a true sports writer that was able to really keep up to date with a lot of the activities as far as human interest stories and everything. And so that portion of the program sort of died away. But in its place, we picked up the Pacifica Sports Hall of Fame.
Which has honored the athletes of Pacifica and coaches and others who participated in sports, not merely the athletes themselves.
Exactly right. So since 1991, we've had the Sports Hall of Fame. But just let me jump back to the Pacifica
Sure.
Sports Club, because this year we're going to renew that portion of the honorees with our athletes. So in June of this next year, we'll be bringing the sports program back, where we're going to actually honor the high school athletes and other participants in a yearly fashion. So we will go back and say, hey, we want to honor the high school kids at this time. And then going back to the Sports Hall of Fame, yes, that's an annual event that's held every February.
The last Saturday of each February?
February 24th this year.
Very
Right,
good.
you'll be there.
I will be there, but I also can't vote on anybody because I don't know who votes, and I don't even know the criteria. But not everybody who loves sports can be honored to the Sports Hall of Fame. Help us out.
Well, you know, today, as we speak, we have 97 inductees into the program, which is really phenomenal. And as I said, we started that first year, and we usually induct 4 to 5, 6 people each year. The criteria is that you have to have a tie to Pacifica, that you have done your achievement in your particular sport while you've lived in Pacifica, or moved from Pacifica, but still had that tie that perhaps you might have graduated from the high school here, but you have a direct tie when you accomplish that particular sport.
So a Major League Baseball or football player who settles in Pacifica for the first time but didn't grow up here, forget
Correct.
it. He can come to the dinner.
We're open for everybody to come to dinner, but it's strictly for the Pacificans who really started that. And you talk about how they're selected. We have a nominating committee that meets every October, that we look at the list that we've been given, and we encourage the community to submit names of players and athletes to us, both male and female, and then we take that criteria, which is, I said, you have to accomplish your feat while you had a tie to Pacifica.
Well, the way they've been honored with a presentation at the ceremony, but also you have plaques, a series of plaques at the studio, at the community center. And all the people who have been honored are now on display at the community center. And we have a video showing a number of them. If you could share with us some thoughts quickly of each of them as they're shown.
Yeah, I think that's really unique that we have the community center to showcase these plaques. As you can see, there's 97 of them on the wall here at the community center. And that one wall is completely filled. Now we're going to have to jump over to the other side of the hall. Joe Buenavista was a graduate of Terra Nova High School, went on to play rugby at the Naval Academy and became an All-American. Ken Clark, in the 1984 Olympics, was a great weightlifter. He lives in Pacifica, and he still does a little workout. Kevin Gogan, probably our most recognized person as far as football goes. He played with the Dallas Cowboys and also the San Francisco 49ers, and has the World Super Bowl rings. Michael Diaz, who just recently, him and his partner Chris Morrow, purchased the Nick's restaurant. He played 15 years of sports here. Ingrid Lacey, unfortunately she has deceased, but she was very instrumental in the youth programs in Pacifica, primarily with the physical fitness and the Pop Warner. Rich Morales, our first Pacifican to sign a major league contract, and he signed it with the Chicago White Sox and went on to have a great career. Joe Hadabunam, a very well-known karate judo expert in his time. Unfortunately, he has deceased as well. Bill Byrne, today he is commander of his own ship, the USS Halliburton, and he was an All-American at the U.S. Navy Academy. Johnny Nava, who recently just ran for the City of Pacifica City Council, was a pride of Pacifica as one of our top boxers here. Very well-known boxer. Steve Shirley, whose family still lives here in Pacifica, pitched for the Los Angeles Dodgers organization, and he lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Bob Lang works for the Water District at the present time. He was a runner for Terra Nova as well as Skyline College and went on to All-American honors. Chris Morrow, as I just mentioned, was a professional baseball player with the Los Angeles Dodgers organization, and later signed and played at Candlestick Park for the Giants. Talking about Title IX, Doreen Gutierrez Pinelli is a fine example of that. She was an outstanding athlete in the GAA, the Girls Athletic Association. She went on to play at UC Cal. Dick Keating, world-class surfer. Everybody knows Dick Keating down here. He did everything on the surfboard. Clark Natwick was a cyclocross cyclist, the top in the nation at that time when he was competing. Jerry Schumacher, I just spoke about Jerry.
Right.
Jerry was the founder of the Pacifica Sports Club. Without him, none of this would have been possible. You really had to take your hat and tip it to Jerry. Lou Piccolotti, I just talked about Lou. Lou was probably one of the outstanding athletes in the early years of Pacifica. As I mentioned, I really wish he was here today to talk about him. Bill Hooper. Bill Hooper was on the very first team for Little League in 1957. Today, he is still involved with Little League, and he's the president of that Little League. Jim Soden. In 1972, we talked about girls in Title IX. Jim Soden was a leader in that. He coached the girls basketball at Terra Nova High School, the winningest girls basketball coach at that time. Marty Coyle, now living in Chico, California. I just saw him a couple of months ago when I was up there. He played baseball for the Giants and also coached at Terra Nova. Bill Gray is continuing to coach football here in Pacifica. He's at Terra Nova now and really is the mainstay behind that program there. Bill Drake, we all know about Bill Drake. Bill Drake came to Pacifica in 1959 to publish the Pacifica Tribune and really put out the first sports page that was really a true sports page. Wayne Johnson. Wayne Johnson covered sports high and above everybody else in Pacifica at that time. And he had a show here on the channel to do that.
Well, Horace, we thank you for running through those names with us, just a few selected names, and one you chose to omit, so we didn't film it because we respected you, but Horace Hinshaw has been inducted in the Pacifica Sports Hall of Fame. One interesting thing in Pacifica happened this month. The Japanese Historical Research Society sent a letter to the Pacifica Historical Society and asked about the record that was set in Pacifica that went into the Guinness Sports Book of Records. And I myself was amazed. There can't be a record here. What's the story about that?
Well, what happened, there was a gentleman by the name of Jim Conley here that was going to set a record as for free throw shootings, basketball. And he contacted Guinness Book of Record, and they set up a photo shoot, you might say, to where he would take the basketball and make the free throws. And they did this at St. Peter's Church, and he did this record in time, went on Regis and Kathy's show at that time nationwide. So Pacifica was very well known at that time. And it's interesting to know that a Japanese station was able to pick that up.
Well, we're still part of history somewhere around the world. Incidentally, the summary of this is that sports are both alive and well in Pacifica, and yet some people think they're not so well. And you've made some comments to me before the show that fields are slipping away, forums are slipping away, enthusiasm is there. Soccer has become big, but what do you see for the next few years, and what are the problems in sports?
Unfortunately, our concern here in Pacifica is lack of fields for our athletes. We have several organizations. You have Little League, you have Pop Warner, you've got the AYSO soccer program, you've got the CYA, California Youth Association Soccer. You've got these programs all competing for fields, and we just don't have enough fields. And the fields that we have, unfortunately, are in poor condition. And you know, to look back though, Frank, that happened years ago back in the 40s and 50s. We had the same situation. We had the fields and they were not able to be kept up. But over the years, the city and the schools started working together and they were able to do some things. And now, unfortunately, they're back to this situation where lack of funds has just made it impossible to do that. Now, the one thing that has remained constant about this whole thing throughout the 50 years of our community is volunteers. Without volunteers, nothing could have been accomplished. Volunteers built White Field. Volunteers built Tonini Field, which in 1966 was donated to the Little League here. The volunteers have built Fairway Park. So volunteers are really the keystone to our sports in Pacifica.
And you also have coaches, referees, and people behind the scenes administratively volunteering to help these leagues stay.
Yes. And that's important. And once again, I think it takes the city and the schools to come together to continue to make sports high profile. And
do you see any ways we can do? Is it fundraising that has to be done? Is it cooperation of finding new places for fields, or how do we maintain them? Who's in charge?
Well, what's happening now in several of the instances is that the school has allowed several programs to come in and take over, maintain the field, and taking care of the field.
I mean, private organizations taking care of the public
For
field.
example, the American Little League now is home at the Ortega School, and they maintain that facility all year round. The American Youth Soccer Association is taking over the Oddsdale School and able to, under a memorandum of understanding, that they're able to maintain that field and use that field during their season. So that's being worked out. Unfortunately, there's just not enough land in Pacifica, open land right now, where you can build a facility. Well, hopefully one of these days that might happen. My biggest suggestion for our city council and our planning commission is that when people come in and want to build houses and property and everything else in Pacifica, that they say, yes, you can do this, but you have to dedicate some parcel of lands to a playing field. That's the only way I think we're going to be able to get more playing fields in Pacifica.
How are we for uniforms and equipment? Are those the parents provide, or the city provides? How does that work?
No, the parents and organizations provide that. And once again, and today, you know, you have to have funds to run an organization. You have to pay for uniforms and equipment, and that's very costly. Fortunately, a lot of our organizations can provide that to pay for the equipment. But once again, it's all on volunteers.
Once again, let's talk about your annual banquet. Can anyone come, or is that limited only to people from Pacifica?
No, we would love to have anyone come. It's as we say, it's held on February 24th. It's open to the public. Dinner this year will be $40, and we're going to, although we have not announced who they are as of right now, they will probably induct 4 to 5 people this year. And the showcase, I think, this year is we're going to play off the 50-year history of Pacifica sports and sort of give the people an education of where, similar to just what you and I are talking about, what happened 50 years ago in 1957 to where we are today.
One of your side careers that we haven't spoken about yet is your involvement with the San Francisco Giants. How did that come about, and what do you do even today? And where are you to be seen with the Giants?
Well, you know, when the Giants moved to what was then at that time Pacific Bell Park, and they've now named it Pac Bell and whatever it is now, but now it's called AT&T. Well, I was suggested to me that I go out and work at the Giants game as an usher, to which now my wife and I work at the Giants games. And there's 81 games a year, so we usually work 50 to 60 games a year. So we can be seen out there when the games and the Giants are playing and home. And if anybody's out there to watch a Giants game, come by and see me. I'm usually at section 117.
Well, Section 117, let's promote a Pacifica activity coming up next year in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the founding of the City of Pacifica. Memorize the date, May 18. The whole City of Pacifica, or as many want to go in that buy a ticket first from us, will be seeing the world champion St. Louis Cardinals. So we have a game with the Cardinals, the Giants will be there, and Pacifica will be there. And in section 117,
yes,
you and your wife will be there?
She's in 119, I'm in 117.
Well, wait a minute, how does that break up? I thought the whole community is to be united.
I'm right behind home plate, so come down and look for me.
Okay, and do you have any other reminiscences of some of the people that we didn't mention that you think did have an important role in the history of Pacifica?
Like I say, Pacifica has a really rich history of sports, and we don't want to forget about those people that, as you see in the Sports Hall of Fame, have made an inroads and to showcasing Pacifica. I mentioned there's 97 people on that wall there. We only highlighted maybe 10 or 15 of them, but they all played a very important role in making a sports of Pacifica to be high profile.
We have time for a few more, if you can remember some of the people you would like to highlight, even though they weren't shown on the screen.
There's, well, once again,
pick 4 or 5 is good.
4 or 5.
Well, sure.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking now who was on there that I didn't talk about, because there's so many that's on there. So I would be, okay. Let me just tell you that it's interesting, and I really want people to contribute to it and send us their nominations to us, and they can send that to us at the Pacifica Sports Club, P.O. Box 626, Pacifica, California, 94044. And what they need to do, they sort of need to give a background of them, a write-up, newspaper clippings, anything that will help the nominating committee make a decision on the selection.
Was it closed for this year, the
It's
nomination?
closed for this year, right.
So they can start on
Next year, right. Every October we make the selection, so they can start from now and submit it in. And the Tribune has been fantastic about helping us promote the Sports Hall of Fame. In fact, we will have, throughout the course of the year, we'll have a form in the Tribune that will allow people to write up a person.
Now, is the sports club limited to some selected few, or can people donate to the sports club? How does that work?
Pacifica Sports Club is a nonprofit organization, and we love to have as many people in Pacifica as possible. The dues are $20 a year per family, which is not very much. And being a nonprofit organization, we only cover enough to be able to finance the Sports Hall of Fame. That's where the money really comes to. This year we're going to add a scholarship to both Terra Nova and Oceanus, so each school will get a scholarship from us for that. And then we're going to, as I said, renew the Pacifica Sports Club Breakfast of Champions, and that was going to be held at the Moose Lodge.
You're saying renew the Breakfast of Champions. For those of us who have no recollection, what was the Breakfast of Champions?
The Breakfast of Champions was what I referred to earlier, where we recognize the high school athletes at a breakfast in June of each year. So we're going
So that's all of them. That's not just the ones that are selected for Hall of Fame.
No, that has
different
nothing
thing.
to do with Hall
Great.
of Fame. We take maybe 2 or 3 boys and girls from each of the schools, Terra Nova, Oceana, Alma Heights, Mercy, St. Ignatius, Sarah, to wherever a Pacifican might be attending the school, and he or she is an outstanding athlete.
Well, we thank you, Horace, for coming down and sharing with us. There's so much more history just in sports alone. And the competitions you talked about, separate from the schools, the surfing and the other competitions, just amazing that this little village has grown to that point.
We even had a boxing club back there years ago, the Valley Mar Boxing Club. We had the youth children there. It was fantastic. So we've had a realm of things happening in Pacifica.
Well, that's all for the time we have for now for the history of sports. But if you want to get involved with the sports club one more time, and then we'll tell people how the History Association.
Right. If they want to get involved and send dues and be a part of the organization, it's send to P.O. Box 626, Pacifica, California, 94044. And once again, we'll be advertising come next couple of months about the Sports Hall of Fame dinner in the Tribune.
Thank you so much, Horace, for sharing those thoughts with us. And that's it for the show for tonight. But remember, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time.